Joining us this morning is Angela Morton. You might see her on the show Recovery Is on Armstrong's Neighborhood Channel. She joins us here this morning. Morning, Angela. Good to see you.
Morning, Luke. Thanks for having me.
This is that time of year where folks are getting, we were just talking before coming on about food and traditions, and it's that time of year people are getting together with family or friends, people coming back home, people want to go out and maybe celebrate a little bit, and there's a lot of, I think, pressure that comes into that, or the stress of being with family or alone. There's a lot that can really kind of chip away at you this time of year. And that might lead to some other things. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, that's really a big subject when we said, What are we going to talk about today with the holidays? Holidays are stressful anyway. We put pressure on ourselves. Society puts pressure on. Social media makes it look like everybody's got the perfect holiday. There are people who are alone. There are people who have estranged family situations. And just the stress of the holidays.
Or people who have a strange family.
Strange, not estranged, but strange,
right.
Yes. So, and that can lead to, in our society, there's a lot of talk about how normalizing it is to drink over the holidays, or if somebody says, I just need a little something, I need a little lift before seeing family, or I'm going to need a drink before I go to this, or while I'm there, I'm going to drink or use other substances. So I think a couple of things. It's important to be sensitive to anybody who is either in recovery, working on recovery, or even seeking recovery, and just being sensitive to not assuming that there has to be, drinks flowing all the time, or that people are going to celebrate by maybe using one more time if somebody's using meth or cocaine or opiates, and thinking it's celebratory time of year, and using, just to be sensitive to there's millions of people out there who are struggling with substance use, and to not just assume that it's a party for everybody.
I think as you say that, again, one of the things I hope people take away is, if you think that this stuff isn't going on in Northwest Pennsylvania, that's not the case. This is happening. If you talk to any of the law enforcement that we have around here, not only is it here, it's been here. We used to have a chief of police on who would say, you don't really want to know what happens between midnight and 6 a.m. But the reality with that is there are problems. There are people working to help those with problems. So to pretend it doesn't exist, I think is part of your message. Stop pretending that it's not here and start being part of the solution. And I think for those who are thinking that, then it becomes, okay, how can I be part of the solution and not a problem?
We could talk about that every time, like to really say, oh, it's not in my backyard, I don't have to worry about this. You hear about it on the news, but the grant projects that I was hired to work for through Hammett Health Foundation, they serve Crawford and Venango counties and rural Erie County. The federal government, the Rural Communities Opioid Response Program granted money to this area because it's an area of high drug traffic. There's human trafficking. We've got a lot of, not just nationally, but rurally, there's lots of stigma around mental health and substance use, suicide. So to assume that, that's all happening on the news, but it's not happening in my backyard, is naive. We really need to be looking at how we can solve some of those problems right here, because they do exist, for sure.
So there's a couple places to go just on that. One side would be those who are using, right? And then the other side would be those who maybe are seeing that or ignoring the situation. Identifying that somebody needs help. We've talked about this, but I think it's, again, important for people to, maybe learn or understand what they can do to help somebody.
Well, I'm going to say that if in any situation, if you want to help someone, coming from a place of understanding, non-judgment, and compassion is always going to be more effective than judging. So if you're concerned about a family member who has a diagnosis of diabetes, who maybe is not eating in the way that their doctor has said that they will need to in order to keep their diabetes managed. Heart disease, if someone's told to not eat as much, fatty red meats, omega, all the bad stuff you're not supposed to eat when you have heart disease, and get better exercise. I'm not a physician, but when you have a diagnosis of any kind and you maybe are needing some help and some guidance and motivation, it would go a lot further if a family member or friend said, "Hey, how are you?" And when they answer, look for an opportunity to say, "I'm here for you." And I have sometimes seen that you're struggling. So if you have someone who's working on a particular issue and notice that they're struggling, to say, "How can I support you and how can I help you? Because I'm concerned about you and I can see that you're struggling." That's very different than, "I see you're drinking again. What were you drinking again? Oh, are you high?" And really coming out with all this judgment and pointing the finger. And any of us would shut down in that situation. So it takes some courage to just gently and compassionately have those conversations. But when talking with people in recovery, particularly a friend of mine this morning said, you really can't invest as if you're going to solve the problem. You're talking with a person and sharing that situation with them. You're not trying to fix them. You're guiding and supporting and offering to assist. And somebody may say, "Yes, I absolutely need help." But on the other end of that, "I don't want to hear about it again. Never bring it up again. I don't want to talk about it. You don't understand," or "I'm not using that much anyway." Or maybe there's been an overdose situation, but a person is in so much pain and withdrawal that they really can't think through that decision until we maybe get them to a physician who can talk about medications to help them not crave and help them not have as much withdrawal, so that that medication for opioid use disorder, or MAT, people call it medication-assisted treatment. So there are lots of avenues to go, but there's a whole spectrum of people who may really want help and are ready to talk about it. So we need to be brave to say, if nobody's talking about it, I'm here for you, and I'm willing to hear whatever you want to talk about, or what is it that you like about using cocaine? What is it you don't like about drinking? Like asking some real questions about the why behind those activities.
In terms of medication, do you find that that's a long-term solution for that person? Is it short-term just to kind of wean them off? Is it because we'll hear, somebody will be on medication and then they start to feel good, so they don't think they need it. And then they go right back to it.
That is a really astute way to say it. We've had a lot of these conversations, but a lot of people think that if you're going to go on medication for your opioid use disorder, a legitimate medical diagnosis, that you should just be on it long enough to get to the other side, and then you need to go off of it. That isn't always the case. So it's like saying, "Hey, I'm taking a blood pressure medication. My blood pressure is stable now. I'm going to quit taking this." And maybe some people can, but some people cannot. And it's the same way with medication for opioid use. Some people will be able to be on it. I've talked to people of all ages who will say, "I was on it for X number of years, and I worked closely with my doctor, and I no longer take it or no longer need it." Other people will say they've been on it for years. You would never even know. And there's not enough people talking about it for us to reduce stigma, to realize that you or I or somebody right in our workplace may be taking medication to sustain their recovery from addiction.
Do you find, and I guess it would come down to probably the individual, right? Whether like one-on-one support is better than maybe like a group support setting?
Well, when a person reaches out, and I always throw this in somewhere usually at the end, but if a person decides, somebody's listening and decides, "I could really use some help, I should probably talk about this," the easiest, quickest place to go is you can either call the back of your insurance card and ask who is for behavioral health or drug and alcohol treatment and get a list of who's covered. Or you can call your local county drug and alcohol office. Every county in the state has a drug and alcohol office or a program. You can call and just ask questions. It doesn't mean you're checking yourself into rehab by making a phone call. You make that phone call, you ask some questions, they'll do a brief screening, and then possibly be scheduled for an assessment. During that assessment, they're assessing what level of care a person needs. So some people will need outpatient one-on-one counseling, or maybe they'll be recommended for what we call IOP, intensive outpatient. So it's like the groups, there's group and individual, and the groups are longer and they're very intensive. So rather than going inpatient, they would maybe do intensive outpatient. So they're really woven into recovery and woven into treatment and supports during their treatment without being in an inpatient setting. But some people really will need a detox or a rehab. So it's a matter of a professional helping assess what exactly you need right now. And ultimately, a person can choose. They can agree, like, oh, I really just can't or don't want to do rehab right now, but I know I need it. Can I do intensive outpatient?
So here's the dumb question of the day.
No dumb questions.
Are they trained to know? Because I would assume a lot of times, and that's probably not fair to say either. I assume there are times when I'm telling you what I'm going through, but it's my perception of what I'm going through. So I don't think it's as bad as what it might be. Are they trained to kind of see that, okay, I think this is a situation that's worse than what you're telling me? And so I suggest you should probably do this, or is it, okay, if this is what you think, this is where we're starting?
Well, there's no stupid questions, no dumb questions, but... and
you don't watch this show much.
Well, I am going to come from this place where we're always watching our words and trying to speak in accepting, inclusive ways. I don't want to assume that somebody struggling with addiction is always not going to be honest, because I think that any of us in any medical situation, again, if your cardiologist says, how much red meat have you been eating? Or did you cut back on XYZ? Or have you been exercising at least 3 or 4 days a week like I asked you? People may say what you think wants to be heard, but I will tell you a lot of people in that one-on-one situation where they know and they're ready to get help will come right out and say, here's exactly how much I've been using. So I think that it's just like any other condition. We want to take people at their word, while also realizing, and yes, people are trained to recognize some of the signs. If someone describes that they're going through a pretty intense withdrawal, they're describing withdrawal symptoms when they stop using for a period of hours or days, but they're saying they really only use twice a week. There are some discrepancies that maybe we can then work through to say, well, you explained that you're really struggling with withdrawal, and it's more common to go through that kind of withdrawal when you're using more frequently or larger amounts. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And even then, the decision is still on that person to choose what kind of treatment, or if they want treatment, or if somebody just wants some case management to foster getting back into life. So case management services are for things like getting your medical card or getting transportation or childcare or something to help support getting connected in life and maybe getting to treatment. And then recovery support is really key as well. Just having AA, NA, non-abstinence-based groups, online groups, other people in recovery, even family and friends who aren't in recovery but maybe are really supportive and understanding to support that path. Because it's really tough to do it alone.
You're watching The Morning Drill on Stream Television and on Armstrong's Neighborhood Channel, listening to it on the Allegheny News Talk Sports Network. Angela Morton with us here this morning. I was going to ask you a question until you just brought that up, going through it alone. So if you recognize, I guess if somebody is going through this alone, but maybe you recognize somebody that's going through it alone, what can you do to be there for them? Because they may not want it right away, right? Or maybe they have that wall up. Is there things you can say or do, or is it just saying, hey, listen, if you need to talk, I'm here?
I think that approach, just that general approach, is really helpful. No matter what you think somebody's going through, being there and just being a presence, I'm here for you, reach out anytime, text or call me, it goes a long way. And I had people during the pandemic who we maybe had a brief conversation like that where somebody almost jokingly said, boy, I've been drinking a lot more during the pandemic, which we know is statistically true. And I, not in a joking way, just instead of playing back and forth with that, I just said, yeah, a lot of people are. If you need anything, reach out. Reach out, give me a call, text anytime, or if you think that it's to the point where you may want some help, please don't hesitate to call me. And that person then, a couple of people would reach out and call them and say, I'm just having a rough weekend, and I know what my tendency is to do, and I want to choose some different things. Or somebody might text and say, I'm having a rough time and was thinking about you, and you mentioned you were available. I'll pick up the phone and call right away. So I think, in general, just having compassion. But people will tell me of all ages, I mean, older than you think even, would say, I became addicted to a medication and I didn't know how to tell anybody. So if you see somebody struggling, a family member or friend, it's really better to err on the side of caution to say, I'm not sure what's going on with you. I have ideas, but I'm really worried about you. I'm here for you. You can tell me anything, and I will still care about you. So if there's something you're struggling with, please don't hesitate to tell me, and we'll work through it together. And then when a person's ready, they may be ready in that moment. They may break down and say, I'm glad you brought it up. I'm really struggling. And then it becomes a conversation about getting them connected to services. And then don't leave them alone when they've disclosed. That's a really big deal. And make sure you follow through with it. Because there are people who maybe will say, oh, yeah, I'm here for you. But then there's no follow through. When someone took the kind of courage to share something that intimate, then to not get any response could be really disappointing too.
Yeah. Such a large area that you cover. What's the day-to-day like for you? I'm sure every day's a little different.
Well, so as you know, for as long as you've had me here talking about just substance use and educating communities about the importance of talking about this and increasing access to services for people who might be struggling, the original grant, the planning grant that came to Hemet Health Foundation that they were awarded was a planning grant to implement all of these things to impact the opioid epidemic. So that was in Venango County and in the Corey area, specifically rural Erie County. And then we received the neonatal abstinence syndrome grant to work with women and prevent neonatal abstinence or neonatal withdrawal relating to maternal substance use. This last grant that was just awarded for psychostimulants like meth and cocaine and prescription stimulants covers Crawford, Venango, and rural Erie. Wow. So my daily could be working remotely by phone, Teams or Zoom meetings, or it may be driving to Titusville for a radio show and then driving to Franklin for a meeting and having some phone calls in Corey and dropping off stickers and magnets at some places in Crawford County who requested them. So I need to be flexible, and I need to be able and willing to pivot when needed, because somebody may say, hey, we have people who are struggling, or we have some nurses who really need some training. Can you get out here next week and do some training?
Wow.
Then just whatever we can do to educate, reduce stigma, and increase access to resources for people who need them.
Well, on the reducing stigma part of it, again, in the holiday season, you may be with somebody over Christmas or New Year's where you just think, okay, there's something's going on here. What are some things, again, some tips you would have for folks in those settings?
Well, something just came to mind when you said that. I tried to picture a scenario that's not hard to picture. Many of us can relate to that or have struggled with it ourselves. Do it alone. First of all, one-on-one is usually better than tag teaming somebody. I think that 2 or 3 people talking to a family member is going to put them on defensive. Or if you have a friend and a group of friends is concerned and the group of friends decides, it usually will go better one-on-one. If you could say, hey, I've noticed that you're having a hard time, or we're all just kind of hanging out and having fun, but I can see that you're having some trouble. Or you had mentioned recently, and we have some time to talk now. If you'd like to talk, let's go for a walk. And just make yourself available. It's where it begins. But also to not invest in thinking you're going to change somebody else, change their choices, change their motivation. As with anything else, we can't force each other to diet or exercise or eat right or anything else that we may want for ourselves, for our family and friends, for society. If you go in thinking you're going to change somebody, you may be disappointed. And it's okay to feel that disappointment when you're trying to help someone, but making sure that message isn't conveyed that I'm disappointed in you if you don't do something about this. That really, non-judgment, I understand, I care about you, I'm worried about you, and then let them make some choices and leave the ball in their court.
Angela, if you could ask Santa for 3 things for Christmas, what would you ask for?
Wow, that's a really deep question. You should have given me time to think about that.
I don't like giving time.
Well, I would love for my son to get news of acceptance at the universities that he's applied to. That, personally would make me really happy for him to, see that path ahead of him. I would really like for people, based on what we're talking about, I'd like for people who are in recovery or who need recovery to feel that there are people and know there are people around that care about them. and that there are resources available to get help if they need it. So that's 2. Third, can I save the third one and
Sure.
like email it to you? I want to save my third wish. Can I wish for more wishes?
No, you can't do that. No, these are for Santa. So I don't think he's got that much time on his hands.
Okay.
But no, those are good things. Well, thank you for coming in. When did we start doing this? Back in, was it over the summer?
Spring.
Spring? Okay. Thanks for coming in every month.
Thank you for having me every month. I really appreciate it. Thanks for helping promote awareness.
And again, if anybody has questions, best place to call?
Recovery is NWPA.org is our website. You can call any of the single county authorities for substance use, meaning the drug and alcohol programs at Crawford, Venango, or Erie County to get connected to services or to ask about the grant projects in the area and resources around those.
Angela, have a great Christmas.
Thank you, you too.
Take care.